Hello and welcome back to Creative Imagineering. This time I'm going to show you how I made this costume lightsaber hilt to suit my Obe-Wan style costume. Hope you enjoy. Wow, I'm just so excited about how this thing came out. It just looks fantastic. It looks great on my costume. And it was actually a really easy build. It all started a couple of weeks ago. I'm in my classroom. I'm a DE teacher, teach coding, robotics to kids and Kodu and things like that. And I've got Star Wars theme right through my classroom. And anyhow, Lee, who's also a Star Wars and Star Trek fan, I like Star Trek too, obviously. And he came into my room and pulled out a bunch of PVC pieces, much like these, and told me that he was going to make a lightsaber hilt out of them. And then he really surprised me, pulled out this set and gave it to me. Thank you, Lee. Well, that's so kind of you. Anyhow, so obviously that put me on the spot. I had to get this thing made, and of course the costume party was only 2 days away. So the next day I went to the hardware store and bought some paint and got to work. Obviously the first step when painting PVC pipe is you need to rough it up a bit. Now you can see in this photo I've roughed up the two joiners on the left and the other one there's there for comparison, and probably the scratches are a bit deep, but also it does give the effect when it's painted of wear and tear on a device that's been used for a while. So yeah, this kind of thing, you don't want it to be too perfect, you want it to look used. And I grabbed out my small hand drill. I drilled a small hole in the cap, which was going to be where the metal ring is for hanging the hilt. And here I am, I've got all of the pieces pushed together and sanded up and glued and everything else. This piece at the top with the brass fitting, the diameter was too small. So I just grabbed some foam strip, for packing, that kind of thing. Just wrapped it around there just to get a snug fit and made sure it was all glued in correctly. And since I was at work and in my lunch break doing this, and I didn't have some rope and everything, handy string or anything, I just strung a few paper clips together for hanging it while I was painting it. It worked. So you can see here, the side window of my classroom, there's a little alcove there with all the air conditioner units, and there's a big concrete pillar, and I was able to jam a box in there and I stuck a hole in the bottom of the box that I could hang the lightsaber hilt from as it's drying. So I gave it 3 or 4 coats of paint. It was a fast dry silver priming varnishing type paint. It was actually really good. I could actually paint it and come back to it a few minutes later, tidy it up, paint it again, and really in about 15 minutes it had 3 coats of paint. It was really impressive paint. And you can see the finish there. So you can see it is rough. It's not perfectly smooth, it's a bit rough, and that's because I want something that looks a bit aged. And of course when painting, the brass fitting had to be covered with tape. You can see it over here. Had to cover that with tape so that it wouldn't get painted over. Here's where the fun started, really, because you can see a whole bunch of parts. Most of them are out of an old printer, one's out of a laptop, and if you go from left to right, this is just a transformer coil out of the printer. This black pin was holding a spring in the printer. Underneath is actually the power button from an old laptop. You can't see it very well, but in here there is another button of some kind out of the printer. And this is the interesting piece here. This is a pair of plastic rods. And what actually they're for is they're lights. They're for the LEDs on the printer, the green and orange LEDs. These ends are pressed up against the LED on the circuit board, which is at 90 degrees to the front of the printer. And it's these ends here that actually stick out the front of the printer. So when you're looking at these LEDs flashing, you're actually looking at the end of these plastic rods. I sat them on here. I have to say, I love the effect. So the next step was to obviously put rubber hand grips on the lightsaber, and I want them here, and also want them on this narrower piece here, narrow diameter piece. This strip here is actually off my old lightsaber. It was the rubber grip from that, and it was just wrapped around. That lightsaber is now a lamp. So I decided to reuse this by cutting it into short strips and gluing it onto my saber. Like that. There's only 4 of them on there. And just to see what it looked like on my way home, I just attached it to the side of my work bag, and you can see it's already starting to look quite decent. The next thing was to attach it to my belt somehow for my costume. So I've got these clamps here. These are off a shoulder strap from some old bag. And what I've done is I've taken one of them and I've just stitched it on quite thoroughly. You can see here I've wrapped brown thread around here, stitching it onto the top of the belt, and I put some more here. You can only really see the thread if you look up close, because it does kind of blend in quite well. The only thing I would need to do in the future to improve this would be that on the back of the belt, just to make it a little bit more rigid, because it does tend to curl over under the weight of the lightsaber hilt. And this was a bonus. I wanted something obviously to fill in this area here of the lightsaber, and I'm walking the dog down the street, and there's an area there where people just dump building refuse. It's horrible, but it's also a good place to find anything that might be good for, craft. And I'm just looking there and I see this roll of self-adhesive rubber strip. It was a bit water damaged for being in the rain for who knows how long, but the actual adhesive was still perfectly fine. So I just cut off the dirty bit and then trimmed it down and into small strips and squares to wrap around the hilt right here. One other addition for the costume itself, and this is to balance off the lightsaber hilt. I've got that on one side of my belt, but I needed something to balance it on the other side. And there was some kind of utility pouch on Obi-Wan Kenobi's belt. So I pulled out this old leather mobile phone pouch, which I don't use anymore, partly because the strap, the loop on the back had torn and was no good anymore. So I cut a piece of belt. This is off a shoulder strap, probably the same one that the clamps came off. Can't remember now. And I just stitched that onto the back of the pouch. It's not visible, so it doesn't matter, it's a different colour, but the end result was quite decent, as you can see here. I'm very happy with the way this will come out. The boots, incidentally, they're just an Australian brand, Aaron Williams, I think, riding boot. They were tan, but they were badly scuffed, and so using some brown shoe polish from another pair of shoes, I darkened up the shoes, and the scuffing and the marks actually made these shoes look really, really good. So I'm very happy with the end result there as well. And this costume you can get on Lazada or AliExpress quite cheaply. And there's my friend Lee in his own costume. You can just see his build right here. Mine, unfortunately, is hidden behind the cape, but never mind. And just for a bit of fun, I did a little bit of photoshopping, as they say, but not with Photoshop. I used PowerPoint actually to make this image, and I'll cover that in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed this build. It certainly was a lot of fun. See you next time.